Well, hello there. Many thanks for keeping it Citizen TV. My name is Wahiga Mwaura, and our sign language interpreter today is Yulan Zale. Time now for your hourly updates. And we start with an update from Athi River, where police have launched investigations into the mysterious killing of 2 children in Athi River, Machakos County. The mutilated bodies of these children were found dumped in a vehicle parked at the Athi River police station. It was still not clear whether the children were killed within the police compound or killed elsewhere and ferried to the police yard. The bodies were discovered after a man whose car had been detained following an accident noticed a foul smell when he was cleared to pick his vehicle.
We have discovered 2 bodies of a boy and a girl, aged between 3 and another one 4 respectively. It was found in a vehicle which has been lying at our station yard since March after an injury accident.
Well, we'll give you more updates about that story in our subsequent bulletins. But meanwhile, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka is cautioning Kenyans against traveling up country should the ban on movement in and out of 3 counties be lifted next week as the government reviews COVID-19 containment measures. Kalonzo, who spoke at his foundation while receiving donations of food and non-food items, says that while he appreciates the need to reopen the economy to salvage it from further depression, Kenyans ought to continue observing the containment measures individually so as not to spike the number of infections, especially in rural areas where elderly and persons with pre-existing conditions are domiciled.
You don't know how this thing is. It could very well be that you are asymptomatic. You're carrying the virus and you don't know. Now, I want you to know, fellow Kenyans, that our elderly people live in the villages. So there's a real threat that you are now going to transmit this virus to the aged Kenyans who are in the villages and who are actually very far from some of these hospitals. So we must be prepared. Because again, we cannot continue under lockdown forever because of the job losses. We have had it all and what has been happening. But the consequences will obviously be tremendous.
Well, let's stay with COVID-19 related updates. Attempts by the Ministry of Health to destigmatize COVID-19 seems to be bearing fruit. A survey by TIFA Research on the stigma associated with this disease found that 65% of respondents were very worried about contracting the coronavirus, more than 2/3 of these being female. However, 77% of Kenyans would visit a patient who had recovered after contracting COVID-19, and when asked if they would allow their children to play with other children, 59% out of a sample size of 843 said they would. The research further revealing that 92% of Kenyans still did not know a friend, a relative or a neighbor who had tested positive. In the case of a COVID-19 related death, 62% of those polled said they would attend the funeral if the number of mourners was in line with the protocol. 79% of Kenyans would undergo voluntary COVID-19 testing. 23% say the barrier to testing is the discomfort. 14% are afraid of being put under mandatory quarantine, while 9% spoke of the fear of stigmatization. Lots of numbers there, but there was a low level of disclosure of positive results. Okay, let's focus on another story here. The government has banned the importation of sugar to protect the local sugar industry from unfair competition. Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya saying the move is to ensure that there is no glut in the sector and also to protect local farmers. Munya added that all government-owned sugar mills will be leased to private investors to try and revive the sector. The government will also write off debts amounting to 62 billion Kenya shillings owed by the millers.
Suspended all brown sugar imports into the country with immediate effect until further notice. 2, suspended pre-shipment approvals and extension of all sugar import permits with immediate effect until further notice. 3, prohibited the importation of raw cane with immediate effect. 4, immediate effect, all applications for brown sugar imports shall be subjected to the sugar import-export regulations, soon to be gazetted. I've already told you those regulations are now in the government printer. They will be gazetted any time from now. We are saying any application now for importation of brown sugar will be subjected to those regulations. And therefore, that's why we are suspending any issuance of import license until those regulations are in place to govern this sector, so that we can be able to contain the influx of imported sugar and therefore protect the local farmer, who must also continue earning a living from his sweat.
The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has arrested Kenya Bureau of Standards Managing Director Bernard Njiraini. Njiraini was arrested for frustrating an ongoing investigation into bribery allegations and the alleged irregular award of a tender. EACC indicating that it had been investigating procurement irregularities and payment of bribes in respect of award of tenders for provision of pre-export conformity of goods, used motor vehicles, mobile equipment and spare parts by KEBS. EACC citing Njiraini as a stumbling block in their investigations. The Commission claiming that on numerous occasions it has requested for the original documents for the KEBS Managing Director, who either refused or failed to comply and cooperate with EACC. Njiraini arrested for continuously frustrating the timely conclusion of investigations. Well, the Interfaith Council, appointed to formulate protocol on the reopening of places of worship, continues to collect views from Kenyans. The committee received submissions from the Council of Governors led by Makueni Governor Kivutha Kibwana. The governors pledged to work with clerics to set up additional quarantine centers in the counties. Governors also pledged to support religious centers acquire thermoguns to be used once the centers reopen.
That was raised in the meeting was the question of thermoguns, so that places of worship which are not able to afford those ones are helped through the COG, are helped through the national government. And I think that's a matter which, if it ends up in your report, I think that's a matter to take into account, because for some of the places of worship, especially the grassroots and in our informal settlements, they may not be able to afford that easily.
And let us also start learning to exercise this new habit that has been taught to us of the new normal of living social distancing, because those are the very determining factors of the success of the reopening, safe reopening, without putting at risk any one of our Kenyans as we meet in worship as faith groups.
Well, let's take a look at what's happening beyond our borders, but still within the region. Popular Ethiopian singer Hasalu Hundessa has been laid to rest in a church in his hometown of Ambo, as protests sparked by his killing on Monday led to the death of 80 people. Mourners at the burial site were seen crying and singing as the coffin was lowered into the ground. Crowds had previously gathered in Ambo Stadium, about 100 kilometers west of Addis, to follow the funeral procession. Residents say Ethiopian police fired in the air to prevent mourners entering the stadium. Hundessa was shot dead in the capital Addis Ababa on Monday by unknown gunmen. Police say 35 people, including prominent politician Jawar Mohammed, have been arrested, although the motive for his killing remains unclear.